Now we're going to show you how you can write your own functions. So far we've only been covering functions that already exist, but in R you can also write your own function for whatever it is that you want to do. And we can go through a very basic function for now, and then there are also other function examples in this tutorial that you can read and explore for your own. But for this video, we'll only go through the first function where we try to translate degree Fahrenheit to degree Celsius. So just to explain a bit more, let's say we want to write a function that helps us convert temperature from degree Fahrenheit to degree Celsius. And we know that if we want to change from Fahrenheit to Celsius, we need to subtract 32 from the degree Fahrenheit and then times that by 5/9. So writing that whole expression in R is going to look like this right here. Okay, so now that we know that, let's start writing our function. So to start any function off, we need to know, give the function a name, and that's what this left-hand side is for. And then after that, we need this symbol right here. Yeah, and that's the same symbol that we usually use to assign value to a variable. And then on the right-hand side, we will have the function. And then within that function will be the arguments within the brackets, or the parentheses, sorry. So for example, in this particular function, there is only one argument because we only want to input the degree Fahrenheit and we want the output to be degree Celsius. So again, there's only one function. That's why there's the only thing within the parentheses is one letter F. And then after that, we need these brackets, these squiggly brackets right here. And whatever we put into these brackets is gonna be the flow of the function. So as we've discovered before, this expression will convert degree Fahrenheit to degree Celsius. So all we need to do now is copy and paste that expression between the squiggly brackets. And also because we want the output of our function to be one single number, and that number happens to be the answer to this expression right here, right? So what we need to do is we need to use the function print and then nest the whole expression into the print function. And there we go, we have our function. Now if we want to see if it works, we can test it out. Because we know that 32 degree Fahrenheit is equal to 0 degrees Celsius. If we input 32 into our newly created function, we should yield 0. So let's run that. And here it says 0, so our function works. Perfect. So that is a very basic function that you can create using R. There are other functions as well that you can explore. And these are just a few more examples of functions that we created or of functions that we can create on R. But the general consensus is that the shell to a new function should include the function name on the left-hand side, and then this symbol, and then the function on the right-hand side, along with the arguments within the parentheses, and then the very last component are the squiggly brackets. And everything that you write into the squiggly brackets, again, is going to be the flow of your function. Now we're going to move on to loops. So in R, we can write for loops that will iterate a particular action or code that we want as many times as we want. So for example, if we assign a vector that contains the numbers 1 to 10 to the variable k, like this. Now let's say we want to write a loop that will add 1 to this whole vector of numbers. We will have to write a for loop for that because we want to iterate the same action in this case. So we want to reiterate, or we want to iterate the same +1 action to each component of the vector. So to write a for loop, we need for, and then that will be followed by a parenthesis. Within that parenthesis is going to be I in, and then the variable k that we just assigned the numbers 1 to 10 to. And then after that, we need the squiggly brackets. And within that squiggly brackets is the action or the code that we want the for loop to iterate. In this case, we want the loop to add 1 to the whole vector that we assign k to. So that's why we need to print k, and then the I in brackets, and then +1. And now if we run this for loop, you'll see that the output is basically the numbers 1 to 10. But 1 is now added to each of these numbers. That's why it's 2 to 11 now. Alright, so another way for you to write the same for loop is instead of assigning the numbers 1 to 10 to the variable k and then writing k here, we just get rid of k completely and write 1 to 10 here directly. Either will work, but usually assigning numbers or assigning values to a variable and then putting that variable into the for loop instead makes it a little bit more digestible as well as easier to edit if we ever do revisit the function. Because imagine if you write more complicated function where there are multiple numbers involved or multiple vectors involved, it's just a bit easier to assign all those numbers or all those vectors into a variable instead. So here's just another example of a for loop that you can explore on your own. And then here are 2 more that you can also explore. So the very last thing that we're going to go over today in this tutorial is going to be how you can find help within and also outside of R. So first of all, R has a built-in help function. So if you're using RStudio right now, in the bottom right window, you should see there is a help tab. And there's a search engine on the top right corner of that little box. So right here. And if you type the function name or if you search whether there's a function or a particular action, then you can also type that there. And then R can give you the best match based on its algorithm. Or you can also use this function where you put a question mark in front and then the function name or the data frame name. And then R will tell you some basic information about the function or the data frame. Or you can also use 2 question marks like this, and then quotation marks, and then put whatever keywords you want in the middle of those quotation marks. Let's say there is a function that you want to search for, but you're not so sure if it exists in R. In this case, let's say we want to find if there are any geometric functions that are already available in R. So to do that, we will need to write 2 question marks and then geometric functions in quotation marks like this. And then R will give us a bunch of functions as well as packages that will or that best match our keywords. As for outside of R, if you need help, then you can always use this link right here, which will lead you to R documentation, which is an external website. It's a really good starting point because it has a lot of R function summaries, and it breaks down the function in smaller steps and smaller, more digestible arguments as well. Other than that, you can also use Stack Overflow, which is also linked here. And this is like a forum where you can ask and answer questions relating to coding. And there are actually a lot of really helpful codes there. So that was a lot of information in one single tutorial, but these are the basics of R. So in this tutorial, we've learned a few basic steps of using R as a data analysis language. And after completing this tutorial, you should be prepared for more advanced tutorials in the future. And remember that learning R is like learning another language. So the biggest tip is just to practice, practice, practice. Good luck!